What a blessing and a privilege it is yet again to come together this week to assemble, to worship God, to see each and every one of your faces here in the assembly. I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful to have my family come in this afternoon to be with us. My wife, Honesty, is sitting on this side of the room. Of course, Stephanie is back, and my three kids are on this third row on this front right side of the building. I'm thankful they're here. I didn't realize that they were going to miss me as much as they did while I was gone, and so I'm glad to be reunited with them. We've talked this week about some ideas that we find in the New Testament about the maturity of Christians in the walk that they have in the Christian life. We began by discussing the darkness in the world, the evilness that comes to us through the darkness that is in this world, and because of that, Jesus predicted, forecasted, and told that it would be more and more difficult as we tried to live as Christians in this world for us to be able to do the work that the Lord needs us to do. We understand as lights in the world, we are to continue to shine our light. We are to continue to do that with certain characteristics, which we discussed in the lesson Sunday afternoon. And then for the last 3 nights, or the 2 nights leading up to this one and now this one, we've discussed different age brackets of Christians. Not necessarily by birth date age, not necessarily by the age you are in chronological years, but rather where you are in your Christian walk. And so there is no particular age group that I have in mind when I say that. What I'm speaking of are those who have been young in their faith, those who are mature or full-aged, as we spoke of last night. And tonight we come to the final lesson in this series, those who are just simply called in the New Testament older. The Bible uses several words to let us know that those older Christians are those that are aged not only in the faith, but also are advanced in years. And because of that, they have a particular set of ideals, they have a particular set of goals, and they have a particular outlook on life because they have almost seen and done it all in their Christian walk. That's not to say there's not still things left for their life to reveal to them, not things left for them to live through. But these are the most seasoned among us, the ones from which we can draw the most encouragement, the most of life's lessons. And because of this, we want to talk for just a little this evening for a while about the light that shines from our older Christians. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning in verse 5, Paul was speaking to Timothy in what we know as his final letter, his final epistle. Paul is in a prison cell in Rome for the second time in his life. This is the last of the epistles that we have access to, that we know that Paul has written. And from what we understand in this epistle, Paul knows that his execution is awaiting. He's on death row. He knows that he's not going to walk out of here most likely as a free man. His hour of departure is there close by. And knowing that he's not going to be in this present world much longer, he has a somber tone to his writing, but it is a tone of reflection. There's no tone of feeling sorry for himself. There's no tones of perceivable regret that we read in this epistle, but rather it is a quiet and calm acceptance of the inevitable. Paul refers to himself in the epistle to Philemon and verse 9 as the aged apostle. Paul must be an old man by now, at least in his own estimation. And yet in the harsh conditions in which he's being kept, probably dank and cold, probably ridden with insects and rodents, he still has words of encouragement and exhortation to offer to the young evangelist. It's remarkable to know that he knows the final outcome, but he's still ready to approach the shores of eternity with his faith in Jesus Christ intact and a confidence awaiting him on the other side. That's a pattern we want to emulate. That's a pattern we want to draw from and learn to mimic. That we can live our Christian life, and although the trials are going to come and have come and will come, and although we're going to have setbacks in life and we're going to face difficulties and troubles we'd rather not face, it is important that we learn to age gracefully in the Lord, living with a calm and solid resolve to finish life's race. To have aged members in a congregation is a blessing. I spoke last night for just a little while, and I said there are places that we go that we don't find many teachers, don't find many people in the middle age bracket willing to take up the bulk and the meat of the work of the church. There are some places we go where there are not many children. They don't seem to have a future for several generations growing up behind them. I hear sometimes people speak of the noise and the commotion that these little ones cause in service. Let me tell you something, that's music. that is music to our ears, because it means there's a future in this place. And don't you dare be embarrassed or worried about the interruption these babies cause to a service, because they are not an interruption. They are the continuation of God's plan in this congregation and all across our land. And we're happy to hear those babies cry. And I'm speaking for myself and those of you here who know what I'm talking about. So you don't worry about that one bit. They're not bothering a person in here that's here to assemble and worship God. Today, whenever we stop and think about, though, the population we have in a congregation, sometimes we get discouraged because most of the people in some places are just the older congregation. They're just the ones that have held on. And we think of that and say the word just like that was just easy for them to do. But when I see a congregation made up predominantly of older Christians, what I see is a group of people who are convicted enough to get up through the pain, to get up and get ready, sometimes taking several hours to get themselves ready to go out the door. Sometimes having to take steps that you and I may never know about, never have to suffer through to get themselves dressed and ready just to attend services, just to get here. And we honor that. And we believe that you are the light, the light you have shown is the light we want to shine. And we believe that you are honorable and honored in our congregations. And we want you to know that because of the effort you put forth, even when it's hard, you are an encouragement to every other person who's coming behind you. Yes, the aged need the younger. Yes, we need to be mindful as the younger generations to honor and to take care of our elder members. But we need aged members because they're lights in our congregation. Many Christians whom I've known and have known and do know, who have clearly aged gracefully in the Lord, have been an inspiration to my own personal growth. I'll give you a quick example. Whenever I first started teaching from a pulpit back home, I did pitiful jobs almost every lesson I would give. I'd put time and effort into study. I just wasn't very polished in the way that I deliver. You can tell that I'm still not very polished. And I got up at one point, whenever I was just a young man, maybe been teaching for about a year. My grandfather had reached a point in his life, he could no longer stand behind a pulpit. He had lost one of his legs because of his diabetic issues, and he'd lost circulation and eventually had to have one of his legs amputated. He'd been a strong leader, strong preacher in the church, and he sat there and listened to me butcher a sermon. Whenever the sermon was over and the amen was said, I couldn't wait to get out and get in my car and hide my face for the pitiful job that I had done. And I knew that if anybody said anything to me about that sermon, that I was just going to break down in tears because I knew what a terrible job I had done. And he called me over to his seat before I could get out of the building. And he made me sit down beside him on the front row. And he rubbed that stump where his leg used to be. He said, "Son, you make this worthwhile. You make this worthwhile." And every time I've gotten in a pulpit since then, I've thought of that. What encouragement he's given to me when I butchered a sermon, and I don't know that I edified a soul in that building that day, but I know I was edified and uplifted from the aged members of our congregation there at home. Don't ever underestimate the value of your words that you speak to these younger people. You don't ever underestimate the value you have to this younger generation coming behind you. Our modern society in America has a way of devaluing our senior citizens. It's really just a process of the way we do things. Do you know the reason your kids have to get up and go to public schools at 7 a.m. is still held over beliefs from the late 19th and early 20th centuries? It was a factory model. And the reason they go to school on first shift is because their mamas and daddies went to the industrial jobs they had on first shift, and so that still holds over. And because of that, the Industrial Revolution in this country caused great changes in the way we looked at society and the culture around us. One of those changes was for the worse. And that is when people got past the age of being able to perform hard physical labor, our society seemed to push them to the side. Our society seems to find places for them to be relegated where they're not in the way, but we can still go visit when we want to. Whenever we stop and think about how many people in our country are treated because they're simply too old to be able to perform physical labor, it's a sad thing. It's not the same way in many places in Eastern cultures. In China and Korea, Japan and India, they honor their elders for their wisdom. I understand that our Native American cultures in this country still honor their elders for the wisdom, the advice that they can still hand down. I also understand that the Bible expects us to do the same as Christians. In Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 29, it says, "The glory of young men is their strength, and the beauty of old men is their gray head." Some people color their hair like they're trying to hide their age, and that's a personal preference. But I want you to know that each and every one of those gray hairs is an honor, because you earned each and every one of them. My wife came to me and asked me, she's got a few showing up in front of her hair. She asked me, she said, "You think I need to color those?" I said, "No, everybody's going to start thinking you're younger than me again. I want you to keep those." In all seriousness, she's earned every one of those. She's earned every gray hair, and every gray hair that's in this room has been earned because it's worried and concerned and heartfelt minds that sit down at night and worry about what's going to happen to those that they're taking care of. Paul left some instructions to Titus in Crete to set some things in order where they were lacking. First thing he left to them to do was to set up elders in the church. Now this word comes from a word that lets us know this is an office, a position of leadership amongst the men there, amongst the church. And that's the pattern of God's word. That's what God's word teaches us. When we have strong and faithful Christians, they need leadership. And I commend the congregation here for taking those steps and making those efforts to see to it you are following that pattern. Why would it be that he would tell him, ordain elders in every congregation? Make sure you set up these saged and aged leaders in a congregation, because it will be their wisdom and their experience that will be needed to be drawn from in order to keep those from coming in and tearing the congregation apart. We need the aged counselors and pastors of our congregation. We need their wisdom and their experience. It's vital in staving off the false teachers and the insubordinate deceivers we read so much about in the Bible. But chapter 2 of Titus begins with another turn, with instructions to speak the words that are proper for sound doctrine, Paul says. And his first exhortation is for the aged members there. Now this is not the ordained office of an elder. This is simply those who are older in their age than those that otherwise may be meeting there. I turn your attention to Titus chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. He says there, "But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the old men be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith, in love, and in patience. The older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, and obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed." The older men he refers to here comes from a Greek word, presbytes. That word simply means an aged man or one older in years. Comparing that with the word he uses earlier for elder, presbyteros, we understand it's a difference from the one who holds the office of an elder. He tells these older persons here in this congregation, men and women both, some sage words of advice that they need to demonstrate. And first he begins with the men, and he says you need to speak those things of sound doctrine first, that they be sober. Now this word comes from a Greek word that means temperate, but it particularly refers to, according to Thayer, abstaining from alcoholic drink. Being sober is literally how we use that word today, to abstain from alcoholic drink. And while sober seems to deal especially with intoxicating beverage, it carries other implications that may also imply any form of excess that we may indulge ourselves in. It may apply to any point of thing that may be mind-altering. Older men in the congregation and in life in general are usually past the point of their life of being hasty and immoderate in almost everything, but especially in drunkenness, especially in the drunkenness with alcohol. You know, we have shows that we like to watch on television to get the good character lessons from them. One of the greatest shows that was ever put on television was Andy Griffith. But in that show, there's one person there that stays drunk all the time. Somebody sent me a joke the other day, said coincidentally he's the only one on the show that was married. Did you know that? I didn't ever pay attention to it, but Otis Campbell is the one we often look at and see, and you know, we make a lot of jokes about Otis. He was funny on the show, but you know, someone who's had to live with that lifestyle, it's a shame and it's an embarrassment to the family. It's caused problems in their home. It's quite a disgrace. Broken homes that are caused by alcohol abuse. The lives that are lost on our highways and from those that imbibe in those alcoholic drinks, the financial distress one brings on their family from that. Certainly we understand that older men of a congregation want to set the pattern that that's not how we behave as Christians. He next says to be reverent. This word comes from a word that simply means august, venerable, esteemed. There's a certain distinguished nature about them whenever you see them. This is not a state of depression. You know, we hear the word grave in the King James Version closely akin or closely translated here. And many people think that means you have to walk around with your head down, sad all the time worried, all the time upset. But that's not at all what that means. It just simply means you are distinguished in the way you carry yourself. Vine says it points to a seriousness of the purpose, of self-respect in the conduct, and that conduct is on a high plane compared to those around one. One who is not serious, one who's always making jokes and trying to be the clown, trying to attract attention by irreverent means. It's certainly not one we want to imitate in the church. Obviously, we love jokes. We love good, clean humor. We love to hear people tell jokes, most of us. And whenever we stop and think about, that's another joke. I told Aaron I wasn't going to quit this week after what he said the first night. But whenever we see people who are constantly trying to be funny and draw attention to themselves that way, we find out that that's probably one of the things they can do to turn people away the most. Whenever we think of what it says in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 4, he says this in verse 3 before this, let these not be once named among you. He lists foolishness and coarse jesting. Now those two words mean to carry on conversations in coarse jesting would be using what we would say dirty jokes and probably crude humor and those sort of things. Foolishness are those things that are empty and vain and have no value. And he says, don't let these things be named among you there. Those things are not profitable. Those things are not helping the congregation grow. Those things are not helping the congregation be edified and uplifted and be the light that they're supposed to be. Next, he tells the older men to be temperate. That word comes from a Greek word sophron, and that just simply means to curb one's desires and impulse. Be self-controlled. It denotes a sound mind of self-control, Vine says. And older men know that they have lived the highs and the lows of life at this point. They recognize the folly in overindulgence. And they also recognize the wastefulness in too much idle time. They know that you can be too busy. They know that you can be too lazy. And they know that you have work to do. And that there are far fewer workers than there are jobs to be done. And so they're sober and they're trying to set the pattern for how serious things are. They know that life for them is drawing to a close, and thus they want to set the pattern for the younger generations to imitate in self-control and sober-mindedness. He next goes on to say they're sound in faith and love and patience. Sound means they're uncorrupted. They're not polluted. They're whole. They get all of their information from the same place and source, that source being the Word of God. Their faith is steadfast, and faith in the Bible is always joined with obedience. As a matter of fact, in the Greek, in many places, the word faith has the word the faith translated from that. That is because they are sound in the faith in Jesus Christ and the way in which Christians are to live. Titus then was to remind the older men there to be true to the Word of God from which their faith is derived. What an example it is to me to go into the home of an older Christian today, even still, and walk in at quiet times and see their worn and tattered Bible still laying on the table because they just finished studying. You go into the homes of some of your older Christians and you think, man, what could they possibly be doing today that they wouldn't have time necessarily to be able to come see me or do whatever we would plan to do. I'll just go visit them. And you walk in and find there's notes still on the table. There's Bibles and Bible reference books still on the stand by the chair. What a wonderful encouragement it is to know that even in the latter years of life, older men and Christians are still interested in studying, learning, and growing from God's Word. I'm humbled to find my brethren doing these things. I tell you what also humbles me. Since the time that I've started teaching in the capacity I am here tonight, I've had brethren twice my age, in some places 3 times my age, get down on their knees in prayer in the public assembly and pray for me to have a long life that I can edify the church. Pray for me to have a long life after they've lived a long life. That is an humbling thing to have a brother pray for you to live long enough to help the church. And I'm honored and humbled each and every time someone does that. I don't deserve that kind of attention, especially from one who's put the time and the years in that some of you have put in. Thank you for the example that you are whenever you do that. He goes on and says, teach the older men to be sound in charity. We know that word again comes from the word agape, which means self-denying, self-devoting love. That is, not governed by circumstance, but by the value of souls it seeks to save. And we understand in the list that Peter gives us in 2 Peter chapter 1, he goes through the Christian graces, we understand, and the last one on that list is charity. Now what I understand from that is when he says add to your faith virtue, that if you have virtue, it's really not of much value until you've got faith. And so when you add to something, the idea sort of is this: you've already attained a certain measure of this, now add to it the next. And then add to that knowledge and temperance and patience. It goes on, and then eventually it ends with charity. Charity, self-devoting love to see other souls saved. That's what he encourages the older members of the congregation to have. Patience comes from a word to remain under. To remain under. What are we remaining under? The weight of being the age that you are. The trials, the tribulations, the weight of what's on your mind, the weight of those that you know that are in the truth and struggling, the weight of those you know who are not in the truth and you want them to be, perhaps family members and loved ones. The weight of that weighs on the older generation's mind, and they are under that impatience. They remain under that constantly. Aged men also suffer from physical pains of the aging process, as we all know. There's a mental assumption that comes to every aged man, and I would be amiss if I didn't remind you that most people who have reached a year of age, when they've gotten to a point where they no longer feel like they can do what they used to could do, they begin to feel useless. They begin to feel like people don't need them around, and they begin to feel like they don't have any purpose anymore. We need to be reminded that as we read over these characteristics and these qualities, that there is a shift in the tone of the things that are being done by these older Christians. If you'll notice the ones we've just gone through, the shift is away from the labor of doing to the labor of teaching, to the labor of making the younger generations prepared to lead and to guide and to bring up those in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. In his advanced years of godly service, the aged man has demonstrated a steady hand of endurance, which will influence those who come behind him to stay the course, which will glorify God. I thank God that I know and have known men who fit these characteristics. Now, you younger Christians, I want you to remember this. You consider the pattern that's been set, and you consider how you're going to follow in the footsteps that have been walked down for you ahead of you, because that's why these men have remained faithful. Then we turn our attention in this passage to verse 3. Attention seems to shift now to older women. The same word here is used, presbyteros, to refer to older as in age, not speaking again of the office of an elder. And again we find the word to be reverent in behavior. That is, their conduct, their demeanor is that which can be honored. Like the men, the manner in which women are to carry out and conduct themselves is very significant. Their actions, their speech, their dress, the virtue and refinement set standards for the younger women below them coming behind them. The King James Version adds the modifier here, as becometh holiness. That is, fitting of people or things sacred to God. The Christian woman lives her life as though she's continually living before God. As though God is noting each and every action that she performs, and each and everything that she does comes under the scrutiny of those that are in heaven. The Christian lady lives a life of propriety in her service to God, demonstrating her reverence as a way to follow, an example that can be followed. He goes on, says, though, not slanderers. The word slanderers comes from a word diabolos in the Greek. Did you know that's the same word from which we get devil? Diabolos. He says, don't be diabolos. Don't slander. Certainly we understand that when one undertakes the practice of slander, they are doing the work of the devil. It's tempting when you grow older and your physical abilities have waned, you no longer feel like you can do what you used to have done, that you begin to complain and eventually complain about others. Be on guard of that as we age, that just because we can't do it doesn't mean it can't be done, and certainly not to fall into the pattern of slander, which is the work of the devil. How careful we must be of how we speak of others. As we said last night, everybody thinks they're right. I don't know of anyone that's an honest Christian that goes through their life thinking that what they're doing is wrong, but they'll just continue in that path. Most honest Christians will make amends and repent for things they're doing wrong so that they can be right. But you need to understand, everybody thinks that. Everybody thinks that their point of view is right. And so you have to handle yourself whenever you're speaking to those, that you don't run others down in the process. That you don't do that just to prove your side. If we flipped over to Romans chapter 1 and looked at that long list of those who are worthy of death, it says at the end of that chapter, we find in verse 30, there's some who are in the list that I call the worthy of death list that are backbiters and whisperers. God is very displeased with slander. He's very displeased with backbiting, with gossip, with murmuring, as we said the other night. And we need to understand that and guard ourselves against it. Use our tongues and our time for better purposes than slander and gossip. Again, we find not given to wine. That seemed to be an issue that needed to be addressed in Crete. The word given means to make a slave of here. That is, you're not addicted to it as a slave to a master. In our modern world today, these parties that sometimes we have, that people go to, they oftentimes have wine tasting parties that some of the women back home go to and they enjoy. He says, don't make those a habit for you to fall into the trap of drunkenness again. Again, this seemed to be a problem in Crete because it reminds the older men to be sober, the younger women not to be given to wine. Here this denotes, though, a confirmed drunkard from the words, and both men and women are warned against the dangers of alcohol yet again in the Bible. The home-wrecking and influence-destroying practices that Christians must abstain from. He then goes on and says, older women, be teachers of good things. Women are forbidden, of course, to teach in the public assembly, as we well understand. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 35, it simply says it's a shame for a woman to speak in the church. Again, 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 12 says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. Again, referring to the public worship service. We understand that. We know that. We've been taught that. It is a sin for a woman to occupy the position that I'm occupying right now, speaking publicly to the congregation. But she's expected to teach. She's expected to be a teacher. She's not only allowed to teach, she is expected to put her time and efforts into teaching because she is given a lofty role in teaching those in her own home. That means then she too must know the scriptures and be ready to share her knowledge of divine truth in the proper setting. In their teaching, the greater portion of these older women seems to be focused on teaching the younger women how to behave and be proper with their families. He says to love your husbands. Now we've spoken of love already tonight, right? The last time we spoke of love, the word came agape. This word is phileo. And we've got a different type of word here. The word phileo has more emotional, affectionate attachment to it. The word phileo is used here for a particular reason. You older women, you go back and you teach your younger women to have an affection and emotion towards their husband, to be tenderly attached to them. Do you know why that's a commandment? Because we're not always lovable. Sometimes we're hard to live with, men. Sometimes we're difficult to be around. And if it was easy, it wouldn't be a commandment. And it's teaching the younger women to learn from the older women that sometimes you've got to love your husband when he's unlovable and he's made you angry and he's done things to hurt your feelings. That's something the older women are commanded to teach, and that's what Titus is teaching here. Older are expected to teach the younger how to cultivate their affection. You know, a home can survive sickness. A home can survive disaster and even loss of a loved one sometimes, but without love, a home doesn't exist. Without love, a home is not there. I've spoken several times about the broken home situations I'm witness to on a regular basis back home from the job that I have, but I understand that many of those homes could be fixed if there were just love there. They also says here, though, to love their children. You know why that is? Sometimes kids are hard to be around also. You know that as well as I do. It's not that we don't love them, but sometimes they're difficult. When kids are little, they're selfish. When kids are little, they think about one person, and that's themselves. And we learn to tend to every need that they have, and sometimes that makes us angry. I told Honesty whenever Nathan was born. Nathan is our third child. Nathan has been a great son. I couldn't complain about one thing. My two girls, they made me think I was a great parent. Nathan came along, and I still think that he's a great son, but he's been a little more difficult because of just the nature of having a boy. But he had some stomach issues whenever he was little, and he cried a whole lot. I don't know, maybe like the first 8 or 9 years of his life. I don't know. He cried a lot for the first 2 years. And I'd been at football practice one day, and I'd had a pretty good day. I mean, we had a great practice. School went well that day. I didn't have to do too much at school to get on to anybody. It was a good day. And I came home, and there he was again crying. His stomach was hurting. It wasn't his fault, but he was crying because he wanted somebody to soothe him. And in my sweetest, kindest voice, I told my wife if he had been first, he'd have been last. I mean, he was putting some hurt on me and Mama. But I also realized once we got that fixed, Mama never once changed her tone towards him. She knew how to love her children. She knew how to love her girls whenever she couldn't spend time with them. And she did an excellent job with that. Loving her children, showing tender affection to them when they were hard to show tender affection to because of how they were behaving. Sociologists tell us that children learn to be affectionate by observing affection at home. It's demonstrated by their parents first, one for each other, and secondly by their parents to their children. Teach the younger women to love their children, Paul told Titus. To be discreet, that is again temperate and self-controlled. To be chaste, that is to be modest. Do not stray outside of the marriage for physical attention, nor dress in a way that would attract people to look at you for your physical qualities. Also to be homemakers, that is caring for the home, working in the home, active in household duties by Greek definition. Her home is one that is clean and orderly. The children are healthy and well groomed, and any work that is done outside of the home should not interfere with those duties. To be good is just simply stated. That is teaching things that are beneficial, doing what is best for her family, and obedient again to their husbands. She recognizes the pattern of God's order of leadership, and she's subject to it and reminds younger women to be so. And the final clause is that the word of God be not blasphemed. What does that simply mean? That if you don't do these things, people who see that you say that you're a Christian but see how you live, think that the word of God doesn't mean anything to you. Think that the pattern of good works that you're supposed to be demonstrating as a younger and older Christian don't mean anything, and the word of God is thus blasphemed. In the next several verses, verses 11 through 13, though, the attention shifts back to everyone, and the scripture uses words like all, us, and we. And we see then that the aged are included with those who are in the congregation. Children often seem excited about aging birthdays and milestones, but adults struggle with aging. They feel less useful, as we've already said, but growing older does have some drawbacks, but numerous benefits. Each day you're going to be more knowledgeable than you were the day before. We well understand that. And as we navigate life, we gain useful experience. Your wisdom is your greatest asset in helping the younger generation learn how to navigate the same troubles you had to navigate. The role of the aged Christian becomes one of example, of teaching, and less of a physically demanding role. And yet there are many blessings to be enjoyed in this stage of life. I want to talk very quickly about 4 of those blessings. God expects you to be honored. God expects you to be honored as an older person in the church. In Leviticus 19, you shall rise before the gray-headed and honor the presence of an old man and fear your God. I am the Lord. Paul told Timothy, do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father, and younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, with all purity. Secondly, wisdom is the virtue that you have to offer. Wisdom is with aged men, Job says in Job 12, verse 12, and with length of days comes understanding. Psalms chapter 71, verse 17 says, God, you have taught me from my youth, and to this day I declare your wondrous works. Now also when I am old and gray-headed, do not forsake me, O God, until I declare your strength to this generation and your power to everyone who is to come. God expects you to be honored in the church, and I see that being done here. God expects you to be one who is revered because of your wisdom and your experience in life and in the service of God. I see that done here. The strengthening of the inner man is something that we need to be particularly mindful of. Our earthly bodies become weak as we age, and as you notice, aches and pains seem to take over your day. Take care and comfort in knowing that God cares for you and shall renew your strength. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31 says, they shall soar on wings like eagles and run and not grow weary. They'll walk and not grow tired. Therefore we do not lose heart, Paul told the Corinthians, even though our outward man is perishing, the inward man is being renewed day by day. Isaiah chapter 46, verse 4 says, listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, who have been upheld by me from birth, who have been carried from the womb, even to your old age. I am he, that even of your gray hairs I will carry you. I have made and I will bear, even I will carry and I will deliver you. That blessing is assured to those who are in Christ, that God will bear and carry you, even in your old age and your gray hair. As our bodies grow older and frailer, our souls are to grow stronger and more purposeful, realizing the time that we have left on this earth is dwindling away. The one last thing I would say about this age group is don't neglect to interact with the younger folks. It's so easy in congregations, especially larger congregations, to get lost in the mix after services. It's so easy when things get hustled and bustled in life to just sort of drift out the doors and not speak to anyone and get in your car and go home. And sometimes you have to do that for health reasons and for other purposes. But I would encourage each and every older person here and each and every younger person here to get to interact with each other. You're not going to receive the wisdom they have to offer if you're not talking to them, if you're not spending time with them. Set appointments in your day to go and visit and spend time together, to go help with chores that may be more difficult than they once were, to love and to cherish after those things that God calls honorable among our elder members. To the older generation, I want to tell you, this young bunch is caught up with a bunch of distractions. They're distracted. When I say young bunch, I'm talking about everybody younger than you, because we're all distracted. We all have many things going on in our lives, but we need to make time for each other, to visit, to share those experiences. I'll add a word of advice here. I know Stephanie has done this, that is here with us tonight. I've got a few of these myself. I wished I'd have done more. Make recordings of your conversations if it's okay with the person you're talking with. Make recordings of some of those conversations of those people you're talking with. I have 2 recordings of my grandparents and one great-grandparent that I cherish because I can't hear their voice anymore. And sometimes I want to remember their advice. I'll go back and listen to some of those. And I would encourage every person here who has one who you know is in the later stages of their life, they're elderly, to make some recordings of your conversations with them so you can remember those things. They're important and you'll want to remember them in years to come. In conclusion tonight, perhaps you have many more years behind you than ahead, and maybe you've begun to think you've offered all that you can offer. Be assured you're still expected to be active in God's service and to continue serving our Creator. The psalmist said in chapter 92, the righteous shall flourish like a palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. Verse 14 says, and they shall still bear fruit in old age. As we grow older, it's easy to lose our sense of direction and vocation and our sense of purpose. But our God's final call to us is to approach the shores of eternity strongly. As Paul said, I have fought a good fight. I've finished my race and I have kept the faith. And if we can all say that, we will have lived a life well in God's service. We don't need to resent growing old. Many never get the blessing and the opportunity, but growing old gracefully is something we need to work towards and become. I finish with a poem, Blessed in Aging. Blessed are they who understand my faltering step and shaking hand. Blessed who know my ears today must strain to hear the things they say. Blessed are those who seem to know my eyes are dim and my mind is slow. Blessed are those who look away when I spilled the tea that weary day. And blessed are they with cheery smile who stop to chat with me for just a little while. Blessed are they who know the way to bring back memories of yesterday. Blessed are those who never say, you've told that story twice today. And blessed are they who make it known that I am loved, respected, and not alone. Blessed are they who will ease the days of my journey home in loving ways. I'm thankful to the members of this congregation who've demonstrated delight in this. I'm thankful to the younger members, the younger Christians who are mindful of the older here. I see it. I'm thankful to the full age Christians, the mature, who have taught that to your younger children, and how you've shown them to care for those who are older and younger than you. And to the older generation, the older Christians here, I'm thankful for the pattern, the example, and the life of consistency and faithfulness you've demonstrated, for you're what we're all trying to become. Thank you very much for the pattern you've given us to follow. Amen. I close the lesson this evening with an invitation to become a Christian. This is the most wonderful thing you can do with your life. To decide you want to follow Jesus, you want to be a Christian, and you want to spend the rest of your life, even to your old age, in service to Him. Believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God who came to this earth and gave His life for you and for me, paying an awful price so that we could go free. Whenever He gave that price, we understand that we must believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God, because that sacrifice was by God and also by His Son for the sins of the world. We must be willing to change our lives, repent, and change how we live for Him. Confess Him publicly before men. Let men know we believe in Jesus. And then be buried in the waters of baptism for the forgiveness of sins, adding us to the church and writing our name in the Lamb's Book of Life. If you've not done that, we would enjoy giving you the opportunity and to do that this evening and assisting you in that process. If you are a Christian and you need to make a confession of fault in a public capacity, we'll assist you with that also while we stand and sing.
Thanks for watching this video. I know what you're thinking. I don't want to miss another video from this channel. In order to avoid that, click on the red button down there, subscribe, and then click the bell icon. Not only will that alert you each time a new video is uploaded to the channel, it will also help spread the channel to other people's awareness. So, go ahead, do it. Like right now, click on it.